Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I-Man here from the Block Runner MetaZone, Roving and MScribe, and today we bring you part 2 of the Ordinal discussion.
That's right. It's called the Intro to Ordinal series.
Something like that, dude.
More than just a discussion, dude. This is like critical knowledge dissemination, dude. So
Yeah.
we can recall it back to part 1. You know, the objective here is to, I guess, fill everyone in. If you're kind of like late but still early to the party,
Yeah.
and you want to know what's happening within the Ordinal space, you hear all the buzz. You see all the NFT like legacy influencers slowly trickle in and like, you know, convert their Ethereum NFT PFPs into Bitcoin Ordinal PFPs. You're like, what the fuck is happening, dude?
Or they're just buying some Ordinals and they're announcing it.
Yeah, but as from like an outsider perspective, it's like, why?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Right. So you have these like these burning desires to figure out what's actually happening in Ordinal. So part 1's that other video back there. This is part 2. Now you kind of understand a little bit about like the technical infrastructure and like the theory behind what Ordinals is and how like now we could add arbitrary data and processes to Bitcoin like we could before, but now it's actually gaining some steam and traction and adoption. So
that's right.
So now what? What's the opportunity here, dude?
Well, let's take a look at the what's happening specifically within Bitcoin. So right now, Bitcoin's worth roughly $1.4 trillion. Congrats, like all-time high.
Literally every day.
Yeah.
We're in price discovery mode. So Bitcoin's doing its own thing pretty much independently of like what's happening in Ordinals.
Yeah.
Because Bitcoin's been on like a 15-year steamer. It just doesn't stop, dude.
Yeah.
And no matter how much like we want to like inject some sort of like, I don't know, like just resistance to its like train. Like,
always go up.
Yeah, it's like, dude, at some point this thing needs to like settle down. No, it doesn't do that.
It doesn't.
It just goes up and to the right. But that makes it like one of the most prosperous and one of the most attractive, I think, ecosystem opportunities in all of Web3, right?
Yeah, and so we're looking at 1.4 trillion market cap for Bitcoin. And so what is the size of Ordinals in Bitcoin?
Yeah, we did like some crazy quant here to to come up with this figure.
Roughly 6 billion.
Yeah. That took many days of research to come up with the overall value of Ordinals, right? Yeah, so we're looking at 6 billion. So that encompasses all the fungible tokens, all the NFT tokens. So this is just a summation of everything. So it's very small, right? Pretty much.
And I have a picture here. Give me a second.
It's small, but still like pretty impressive considering it's about a year old since like the Ordinals ecosystem kind of like started gaining momentum and traction.
Yeah.
So to accrue $6 billion, roughly, in like ecosystem value within a year frame, like during like the heat of a bear market as well.
That's right.
It's pretty fucking impressive, right?
Yeah, and so this is took a screenshot of us talking about BRC20s early on.
Literally like this time last year.
Yeah, March last year.
Yeah.
And so look at Ordi at 60 cents, 12 million market cap.
Yeah, this is what got us like really into the Ordinal space. You know, we heard about it back in, a month or two prior with like Yuga Labs doing their own Ordinal collection experimentation and such. But we were like, man, there's a lot of infrastructure missing. So weren't too bullish at it yet.
Yeah.
Bullish on it as a concept, but not as like an actual ecosystem to get involved in.
Yeah.
But it was right around here with the BRC20 stuff is where things started to like really, really pick up.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, look at that market cap, dude. 26 million for the whole thing.
For the whole thing. All of BRC20s.
Yeah, so it was quite the crazy step to like see that and be like, you know what, we're aping in.
Yeah.
This is what we should be pivoting our attention and focus to, but I'm really glad we did.
Yeah. Because
of that, we have a year of like lead, I guess, in the rest of the market and understanding what Ordinals are.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of these tokens didn't do much. Pepe, Meme, like a lot of these are just...
And the fault of that is largely due to the limitations of the protocol itself, right? So you'll come to experience that once you start to get involved. You know, these are very primitive protocols. There isn't much you can do yet with most of them.
Yeah, correct. All right, so let's take a look at so what? Who cares about Ordi, right? Well, the so what is right now the market cap is $1.6 billion.
Just that one token alone. So there's other BRC20 fungible tokens.
Yeah.
Under the classification of Ordinals that are also like in the $1 billion, the hundreds of $1 million space, right? So, and Ordinal collections, like actual art collections and such. So this is a growing space, and there's already been like several 1,000x plus opportunities like demonstrated in its first year trial run, right? So going back to that 6 billion to the 1.5 trillion like market discrepancy gap, that is like the room of the scope and range of experimentation and value output potential, like moving forward, right?
Correct.
So there's a lot left. In other words, you're not, like you said, you're late, but you're still early, really.
Yeah, you're late and early.
Correct. So I guess so this is part 2. So we understand a little bit infrastructure, what ordinals are, what they enable, and then what's the opportunity here. So like what's actually being built. What are the metas?
All right, so let's start with digital art, right? We have obviously we have the big ones like Node Monks.
Yeah.
We have the OMBs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's been happening in the ordinal space over the last year, and so some of the metas include rare sats, right? Recursion. That's a piece of technology that allows you to point to other parts of Bitcoin to collect information into a single inscription. Correct.
So basically, like some of these art pieces here, they look like one piece of content, but on the back end of like the inscription in details, it's actually pulling like bits and pieces from many other inscriptions and assembling it into one little display.
Yeah. Here. And if you're wondering, this is generally like low resolution type of art. And that's because the higher the resolution, the bigger the file, the more expensive it is to input into Bitcoin. So, so the way to mitigate that is just take the pieces out, the layers of your art, and scribe them individually because it's going to be smaller files. Yeah. And then you use recursion to take all those pieces and put it together.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big, like, widely used methodology, and therefore it adds value to the art, just like rare sats. That is like a new canvas that artists are experimenting with. It's like, we're going to inscribe all these details onto a Satoshi with a unique property, right? It's a Satoshi from block 9 or Satoshi from whatever the fuck. That's part of that pizza transaction, right? Or that block of transactions. So these things add, perceptions of value to the art outside of just like what the art represents, right? So this is like the newness in the space, in the art space.
Yeah.
Parent-child.
So parent-child is interesting. You take an inscription, an asset that already exists, and then you inscribe a child. So what that does is essentially it creates a provenance, meaning on-chain you can point back to its original parent inscription.
Correct.
And it's supported by basically every single marketplace that supports the Ord wallet, which is the Ordinal theory, right?
Yeah, that one's really taking off. Like you got the on-chain monkey down here at the very bottom. I think this Danny Yang was the one who pioneered
recursion and parent-child.
Yeah, but it's starting to become like widely adopted and used in a lot of these collections. Because on-chain provenance is important, right?
Well, it's happening now because of the Jubilee update, which enables bulk child inscriptions, which is a sort of like a complex thing, but it's being done now.
DMT,
digital matter theory. That's one of the metas here. So this is an example, the best example of DMTs, Natcats.
Yeah.
You might have seen that on Twitter trending every now and then. And then we have cursed inscriptions. So that is a thing of the past now. You can't make any cursed inscriptions anymore.
Right, but it adds.
But there's like 500,000 inscriptions that are cursed.
Yeah, so that's like part of the meta of like, okay, which of these like so many different collections, like what are the value tenets to them? Some of them, they're always going to have that legacy attribute of like part of like, basically it's like a badge of like testnet honors. Like, we were so early. Yeah. Our inscriptions were cursed, which they cannot be anymore. So it's like, that will probably add future value, collectability and such. Same as the low inscription numbers. You can't have low inscription numbers anymore.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but you got to remember, whenever you see some of this art, they're going to be saying, hey, these are on rare sats.
Yeah.
Or we're using recursion, or we're using parent-child, or we're using DMT.
Yeah.
Or these are cursed. That's why they're valuable.
Yeah.
Or these are low inscriptions. That's why some of these are going for like $1 million.
Yeah, like a rock. It's like, why would a rock sell for like, $400,000?
Yeah, it's because it's a 6 inscription.
Something like that. Yeah. So like those things matter actually.
Yeah. And then finally, dynamic. So
that's like a word that's like encompasses, I think, a lot of different things, but basically just like collections or pieces of content that have the ability to basically transform.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically a script where you interact with it, and the image does something, right? It could be a game.
Yeah.
It could be
a hatchable egg.
Yeah. Right? Which is happening on DMT. Yeah.
Yeah. So, And of course, this is just today, right? Today is March 2024. That's the metas of today. I'm sure this list will expand into the future.
Right.
And that's the task at hand, right? If you want to come in and contribute to this space, like start innovating, right? Because that's the best thing you could do is come up with a new innovation, like we did with DMT. And there's a whole new sector of art creation, unique non-arbitrary tokens as a result, right? People were like, hey, this is interesting. Like never before has content been dependent on block information and block data, right? So like I want to fuck around with that and see what happens, right? So I'm sure more experimentation will come.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about DMT, we have several videos on that. Just kind of search on our YouTube channel.
Correct.
All right, so moving on, Bitmap metaverse ecosystem. So one of the biggest metas is Bitmap.
Probably like one of the best like underdog stories that has happened over the last year.
Yeah.
Because I mean there's like a cabal within Ordinals of like, very influential types that, they're very focused and influenced on like the art space.
Yeah.
So like out of nowhere, this little fucking this metaverse thing just emerged and like metaverse, no thanks.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't belong on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But it quickly like rose and outperformed everyone's expectation. It became like one of the most important components to Ordinals, right?
Yeah, it's the most held Ordinal. It has the most holders, and then it has the biggest count of Ordinals, 800,000 plus.
Yeah, and it has like an actual active community, not just like holding these things and like going on Twitter and just like repeating the catchphrase of these collections over and over and over again. Like this is an actual ecosystem where people are contributing and developing real stuff to enhance the ecosystem's value and strength.
If you
fascinating.
If you ever look at the crypto ethos, it's like, let's create communities and let's have the communities like contribute to its community, right? Like Bitmap is that, right? It's actually happening where holders are actually contributing to the ecosystem by building what you're seeing here, right? Yeah. We have NAS, non-arbitrary spaces. We have AI, right?
Yeah, BRC 720s, BRC 420s.
420s.
Like a content standard protocol.
Yeah.
So these are like the deployment stack. So metaverse, like what is it? It's basically Bitmap is like an open canvas protocol for at the very top left here, you see that is an actual bitmap, right?
Yeah, this is what Bitmap looks like.
Yeah, this is a non-arbitrary rendition of like a virtualized representation of the actual space within a metaverse grounds, I guess.
Yeah, if you want to get deep into Bitmap,
we literally have like a 50-part video series, like it's somewhere in our channel, like a playlist of Bitmap videos.
Yeah, so we go deep. We discovered Bitmap early on when it was like less than 300 inscriptions, and then 3 weeks later, it was 800,000 inscriptions.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Literally, we Bitmap started just like that. The very top left, it was just that, and over the last, I'd say, 7-8 months, it's manifesting into like everything else you're seeing here, right? There's so much contribution happening.
Yeah.
And we're seeing like what an open framework standard does. Like that is a big experimentation. That's the new thing that hasn't been part of the metaverse ecosystem in Web3 before, right? It's been mostly like siloed ecosystems. Now we have like a good starting point for developers to contribute, right?
Yeah. So we talked about BRC 420s. We talked about non-arbitrary spaces. So this has its own thing that's really deep.
Yeah.
MML enabled UNATs, so unique non-arbitrary tokens, and this is metaverse markup language. This is a representation of that. And so this is kind of like an emerging standard that's happening right now. And then we have BRC 720, which is using AI to generate assets.
3D content, yeah.
3D
so
content.
This is going to have hopefully some much more ingrained application for, the 3D virtual space. Because, Bitmap, there's a 2D space, the bitmap.game, and there's a 3D space, right? So interpretations of like the metaverse, it's as broad as it can be, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be pigeonholed as three-dimensional space. It could be two-dimensional, right? So we've seen it all happen.
Yeah, so bitmap.game represents the 2D space. Inscribe.space, 3D, Bitmap Valley, that's IMSO Chris.
3D.
That's another 3D. Bitmap OS, that's what this virtual environment is.
Yeah.
And Expector is another one, and Foxyverse is another one. So these are all like community members like contributing to the ecosystem, building their own technology stacks to deploy virtual content.
Correct. Yeah.
On top of Bitmap.
Yeah, and it's all cohesively aligned again because it's the underpinning framework to it all.
Yeah.
Is Bitmap, right?
Yeah, you're not going to find another ecosystem that has this degree of contribution from the community.
Yeah, and just interesting complexity. Like it's a very deep rabbit hole you can get lost in for a very, 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 very long time.
As we have.
as we have, and it's going to continue to evolve because the metaverse initiative is like one of the more complex.
Yeah, it's the most complex things we've ever seen
in all of crypto. Yeah, just probably like in all of like humanity's like frontier space.
Yeah,
trying to actually figure out like and unlock true digital economic and digital existence viability.
Yeah,
outside of just like video games that are very centralized and non-conducive to like actually
economies.
Yeah, positive momentum for human livelihood, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the real goal for the metaverse. So
yeah,
we're on our way, lads.
Yeah.
So yeah, you keep following us because that's what we're focused on, you know?
Yeah. All right. So in addition, we have fungible token meta protocols, and it felt like there's 50 of them, but we've kind of narrowed it down to the most popular.
There were a lot. A lot of them have like kind of like came and fizzled away in the early days. Like BRC20 like really like shocked everyone once it like hit the scene and quickly rose to $1 billion thing.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, all right, let's spin up like new derivative token protocols to kind of like make a better version of this.
Yeah.
And some of them have came, some of them have left, but some of them are actually pretty strong. Like some of these on this list, right?
Yeah. So big one, BRC20, and then the next big one is TAP. So TAP ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So TAP is like BRC20, but TAP has like enabled extendability on that meta protocol.
Correct.
And so which it allows developers to come up with kind of like new angles, new sauce.
Logic.
New logic to kind of
which is important, right? Because if you know BRC20, there's only really like 3 functions built into the protocol, right? It's like deploy, mint, and transfer. That's about the scope of like what you could do.
Yeah, there's no logic in there.
Right. There's external forces trying to like come up with logic implementation mechanisms, like Unisat and others.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very challenging, right? For whatever reason. But TAP is kind of like it's built into the protocol itself. Like it is like naturally extendable.
Yeah.
And therefore it's what DMT is built on.
That's right.
And a lot of future DeFi projects are starting to kind of like come into the ecosystem to experiment as well. Because as you know, DeFi is a highly functional ecosystem. You need a lot of logic and programming for that.
Yeah. So Pipe is from the same ecosystem of TAP. It came from Track Systems, which is right here. And this is sort of like a competitor to Runes, at least the technology implementation.
Correct.
But yeah, so this is going to be part of the ecosystem. CBRC20 is another one.
Yeah.
Kind of like fungible standard.
Yeah, it's like a spin-off of BRC20, but much more efficient in its design, and therefore like the weight of these transactions is I think 50% or more.
Yeah, a lot cheaper to interact with.
Correct. So it addresses like scalability concerns and bloating of the network effect, like that these like fungible token meta protocol specifically kind of introduced, because they introduced a lot of like useless like information embedding, I guess, in the context of like we have to inscribe things just to move things around and stuff.
That's
like,
right.
It's like fuck.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin is like it's a lot of weight,
a lot of bloat.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where CBRC20s came in. BRC100 is another extendable protocol, right, where you can actually implement like different functions within the token standard. Saturn is an interesting one, right? Like with their leveraging rare sats and turning them into like
that's right.
fungible devices, right?
Yeah.
So, and Runes, like we just talked about it, we don't even have a logo for it yet. Yeah. So we just slapped Casey on there.
Yeah, that's Casey right there.
That's him, dude. If you guys wondered what the guy who invented Ordinals looks like,
yeah,
there he is.
Yeah,
in all of his lightning glory or whatever the fuck is on his face.
Yeah. So yeah, Runes is dropping at the Halvening, so in April at some point. So yeah, stay tuned for that. All right, finally, side layers to Bitcoin. So once you start looking into Bitcoin, you start seeing L2s, and it's pretty obvious that L2s are going to be sort of important because Bitcoin is the first chain ever. And it's very primitive, and it's pretty easy to like congest it, right? Yeah. So it's pretty obvious that L2 is kind of needed, right, guys? And so we got a ton of attempts here. So first one is Merlin. We got Stacks, and then 100+ more to come.
That's our prediction.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Stacks was actually like the actual first. Well, I think Stacks, when we first came into the Bitcoin space, Stacks was already there.
Yeah.
For many years, right? So like they're addressing this like Ordinals hype.
Yeah, this was like in 2016.
Yeah, they were talking about they knew at some point like Bitcoin needed to be extended into like tertiary layers.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's try and do that, and then like let's add in some more functionality as a result.
Right.
And then now, after Ordinal's like runaway success, the fucking cabal is here, dude.
Yeah.
It's like let's basically leverage all the past 5 years or so of scalable infrastructure innovation that has like emerged from Ethereum.
Yeah.
And let's just like deploy let's use these tools to deploy sidechain environments that can bridge a lot of this like liquidity from the Ordinal space into our siloed ecosystems, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So we're seeing that, and it's going to continue on because
several flavors. Yeah. A lot of copy pasta.
A lot.
And so be careful here because like Satoshi VM, there's a lot of I don't know, like questionable information happening from that. It's like that's just one example. Like to always do your research.
Yeah.
Don't ape into this stuff because 100+ L2s. You think that's sustainable for Bitcoin ecosystem? No. There's going to be one or two at best.
Yeah.
Taking the liquidity and the share of like the usefulness of an L2 on Bitcoin. So there's going to be a lot. The reason why we're predicting 100+ more is because when we went to ETH Denver a year ago, there was like at least 50 L2s for Ethereum.
Yeah, basically. So considering Bitcoin is like twice the market, maybe even 3 times the market liquidity harbor of Ethereum, I think it's going to attract 2 to 3 times more layer 2 deployments, right?
Yeah.
And this is just the way the cookie crumbles in crypto, dude. It's like people see money, people quickly rush to where it is, so there's going to be a lot of, it's a dangerous space. So definitely don't trust everyone. And this is one of the sectors of Ordinal's like evolution and expansion that requires the most research and technical
understanding of like how all this stuff works.
And added trust assumptions, right? Like things that really like Bitcoin is not like supposed to be about, but this is what happens, when things start to make money, you gotta expect it.
So we decided to put this like presentation quickly together just to give you guys the actual words that you need to research in order to get into this stuff, because there's a lot of words and a lot of it is confusing. Like when we first jumped in, it was like BRC20. It was like, cool. Then it was like BRC 420 and then BRC 21. Yeah. And then there's like 50 of them.
Yeah, it went crazy.
Yeah. And so these are the main ones that you should pay attention to and do your own research, right? It's a lot of stuff, right? We're not going to be able to cover everything in the 20 minutes that we have. So
we cannot. So this is a good starting point.
So what are we talking about next, part 3?
Well, it's like now we know like the theory, the infrastructure, like, air view of like what's happening here. Now we're seeing like what's actually being produced of value. So now the next step is like, okay, what are the tools and like what are the platforms and marketplaces and such? Like, how do I actually get my hands on this stuff?
Yeah, and also like who to follow. The OGs who've been talking about.
That's
Ordinals.
True. We know them because we've been around. So it's like you want to listen to people who were here during like the hard days, right?
Yeah.
Not people.
Well, there was no proof. When? Yeah. By the way, hold on. Let me go back. When this.
These were some tough days.
Yeah. There was no proof of market here, right? This was like as degen as it possibly gets.
Right. This is like whenever like the indexer dilemma was clear in center stages. Like these everything was going down regularly because everything was just like so dependent on like one indexer in the whole space. And it's like, God damn, dude, we need to like fix this stuff, right? So it was confusing, it was terrifying at times, but it slowly is surely maturing and evolving and becoming a much more like confident or not confident is not the word.
More stable.
Stable, whatever. It's just it's slowly turning into a Chad. In other words, the Ordinal space.
Yeah. All right, guys, that's it for us. If we miss anything, let us know in the comment section below. I appreciate you guys for watching, and stay tuned for part 3, and we'll catch you in the next video.
Peace.